Yet along the journey, 64 of them, along with 16 guards, perished in the Shahola train wreck in Pennsylvania. Many more died at the prison from disease, and some were even shot for just walking to a different part of the prison. As written in Derek D. Maxfield's book, Elmira, the Union's most infamous Civil War prison camp, Elmira, New York, there were even stories that said that there were signs at the camp saying, "Any man that touches this fence will be shot dead." That's a very chilling quote. Now, John W. Jones, the escaped slave and Underground Railroad conductor, helped to bury many of these men in what is now Woodlawn National Cemetery, as we've discussed before. The burial place of icons like Mark Twain and Hal Roach. These men, who would have seen Jones forced back into slavery, were buried with such honor and dignity, a circumstance rarely seen in our bloody Civil War. Regardless of the side that they stood for, it goes without saying that the life was harsh for the prisoners, was rough. Many starved, and as stated before, many died while imprisoned. The conditions were similar in other camps run by both sides, but the name Elmira gave this particular camp more notoriety. Now, hindsight 2020. There are many people who have attacked/would attack an institution such as the Elmira Civil War Depot. It has been a part of our history that is shrouded in controversy due to the deaths that occurred during the time that it operated as a prison, and now it's pretty well forgotten in our city. I have also personally heard comments bashing the way that Jones handled the Confederates because, they would have seen him sent back into slavery. And
there's an incoming call. Answer your phone.
Now, let's talk a little bit about that movie in 1989, which is another part of our Civil War history. So believe it or not, we've also had quite the national stage during our Civil War history outside of the county limits. Remember the Matthew Broderick and Denzel Washington film Glory? A number of Chemung County citizens served in the famed 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the second all-African-American regiment in U.S. history, which was the subject of this film. 24 men, such as Miles Moore, Wesley Armstrong, and William R. Lee, were among the 600 men in the regiment who led the charge against Fort Wagner on July 18, 1863, just over a week and a half after the Union victories at Gettysburg in the east and Vicksburg in the west. Lee was among the 30 killed in the battle, with 5 other men wounded and 3 of which succumbing to their wounds later on. George Moshrow, another Elmiran in the regiment, was captured and, despite the Confederate order to execute any African American in Union uniform, lived to be exchanged 2 years later in 1865. Though none of these men were specifically mentioned in the 1989 film, it is important for us to remember them as heroes in Elmira's Civil War history, while venerating them as national heroes as if they are mentioned in it. Now, after the war. For decades after the American Civil War, Elmira was a jewel of the Northeast. This city was home to vaudeville shows at the Clemens Center of today, leisure activities such as swimming at the bowler hat-shaped Brand Park pool, baseball games at Dunn Field, and so much more. So we've talked about it most of the evening. Elmira was a very beautiful place to be. It was, it was happening here. The people here also continued to flourish. The city enjoyed many talks by Mark Twain, one of which inspired, and I believe the story goes it was over at the Park Church. It inspired people like the famous filmmaker Elmira and Hal Roach. And it was also home to the likes of Clara Cook, a popular women's baseball player, as well as the politicians Thomas Flood and Jacob Fassett, and many other notable people. Now, what about now? So 170 years after the beginning of the Civil War, Elmira is in the midst of an age of rebuilding. The flood in 1972 took its toll on the city, and the effects can be still felt with the slow but sure rebuilding. Nonetheless, we've still had places like First Arena, Eldridge Park, built in the 19th century, and others to enjoy. We've even had a new modern wave of local heroes such as Ernie Davis, Eileen Collins, Ted Arnold, Tommy Hilfiger, and so many others. So why does the now matter? Well, Elmira got put on the map basically by our involvement on the national stage. And, after the flood, it kind of ceased to be that jewel of the Northeast, whether it was serving the military or serving commerce, stuff like that. We were, as a county, forged out of the Civil War, and it's important to think about what has happened since the Civil War, but we also can't forget the history, however painful it might be, of the things that happened here during the Civil War. And I'll open up to questions.
Wow. Again, I don't know any of this, but I'm not from here, but I don't know any of this.
So how many years was it a prison camp?
So it was only a prison camp for just over a year. It was
11 months.
11 months. It wasn't a prison camp until later in the war. And so until then, it served as a mustering point, training point, enlistment center, So our military roots are way before it became a prison camp for Confederate soldiers.
And all those soldiers died in 11 months?
Yeah.
Good. Wow.
What was the number again?
Over 2,000.
The number I've seen, 2,888, but it's pretty much 2,973.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Keep burying as many as 30 a day.
Do you want to introduce the friends of Do you want to introduce
But
the
the
friends
disease was
of the
pretty rampant.
Chemung
Like
County
that,
Civil
that was
War
And honestly, disease was pretty rampant at
the friends
many of the Civil War prison
of
camps this year.
Chemung County Civil War prison.
Yeah.
Weren't the other ones mostly ended up in mass graves?
Yeah, you should do that.
So this is a question for either you or our Elmira Civil War prison campers. What can be seen today? So, if you visit, what can you see? Is there any remnants of it left?
If you come down for the tour, it starts with a monument there in front of the water board, which is located within the confines of the original camp itself. On Water Street, at the corner of Hoffman and Water, just underneath the bushes of the greenhouse that's on the corner, there's a marker that shows the northeast corner, and then further west on Water Street, there's also a marker just beyond Gould, right around that area, that shows the northwest corner. On site, we have resurrected, rebuilt what was identified as a potential original building from the camp era. What it is, we don't know. The records aren't sufficient to cover that. We've created and built a recreated Civil War barracks. It's modeled after the 1861 training barracks. So that's what's on site now. Springtime, we talk. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. We do have an original artifact that you can see. The flagpole that's just to the left of our monument down there is the original pole. Used to be much taller, 30 years ago or so. Lightning blew out the top and made it a lot shorter. But like Talima says, construction. This spring, we're hoping to break ground for a 40 to 50 foot replica section of the stockade fence itself, complete with guard walk and sentry boxes. And our long-term project is a state-of-the-art Civil War Heritage Center. to cover both the recruiting, the training center, the draft operations, which Elmira was responsible for the entire Western New York area. If you got drafted, you came here. And then as well as the prison camp.
Could you please identify yourself and your organization? And thank you for coming.
No problem. My name's Terry Chevy. I'm a board member with the Friends of the Elmira Civil War Prison Camp.
All right.
Author, tell me about your book.
During COVID, we put together all of our research, and we've published a book, Elmira Civil War, 1861 to 65. It covers the entire period from 61 through 65, including veterans' activities post-war. So there's a copy down at the Chemung Historical Society, or you can order it online, or get a hold of one of us, and we'll bring it to the house.
Thank you.
And nobody asked me, but we have a book that is being, we're gonna self-publish, that was completed by 4 classes of Notre Dame high school seniors who were so impressed with the story of John Jones, they took it upon themselves to write a book. It is fabulous, and they passed it to each successive class until it was finished. So one of the young ladies is at the Philadelphia Art School, and she did the illustration. So we're going to be excited to put this out into the community and hopefully in all of the age-appropriate schools.
I got a question for you, Mr. Earl. You were mentioning the different locations for the barracks. Could you go back through that again? Because I think there's a mistake in there.
So according to my research, so there was one around the Parker Field of today.
That's number 1.
There was another on the south side near the Pennsylvania Railroad
That's
yards.
the mistake.
Yeah.
That was thought to be true because
Okay.
it mentioned a basin, and that's the basin that they talk about. It also mentions a railroad spur, and if you go back to the early maps, that railroad spur also runs off. Now it was part of the Lackawanna Railroad, but it's now a walkway through there.
This is huge history here. I mean, huge. Really, it's really quite something. That should be.
It's not taught in high school, I'll tell you that.
Right.
Or it wasn't 40, 50 years ago. Never heard of it.
Not enough time in the day.
Yeah, I understand, but
Even though it doesn't reflect toward the prison camp or toward other things, we just had the Senator Gillibrand here 2 days ago, and she was presented with a plaque for. Let me make sure I get this right. My name just.
Eastman, was it?
Yeah. And she moved here when she was 13 years old from Pennsylvania. And she lived here. And I believe her parents taught at Park Church. And, there's so much history in Elmira. You had Thomas Beecher, Harriet Beecher Stowe. You had Eastman. You had John Jones. You had the Civil War. When you think about it, a lot of America's core can be found right here in Chemung County.
I've said
And
that.
this is what I've been talking about, make this, Elmira has so much history, and we're a part of so much of the nation's evolution. It should be historic Elmira.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We have native born, we have transplants, they all came here and did great things out in the world, right? We've left our mark on history.
Frederick Douglass came through.
You gotta come to the John Jones Museum to hear about the
Shameless plug.
Gorgeous celebrations of emancipation. You know about Juneteenth, which was the moniker that came from the Texas
Tradition,
because
yeah.
it was 2 years late, so it stands out. They didn't want them to know until they finished the harvest a couple of times. But they had one of the largest in this state, here in Elmira. Frederick Douglass was the orator of the day. John Jones was the president of the day. We had another one celebrating freedom, but this included the emancipation of the British slaves. Again, John Jones was the orator of the day. Frederick Douglass was the orator, and John Jones was the president. And that sounds funny until you actually read the newspaper, 2-3 pages of the procession, the celebrations. They did it at Grove Park, which at that time was Hoffman Park, Hoffman Park, right. They did it there. They came back here to the AME Zion Church, which was then named Frederick Douglass AME Zion. And when he died, the Frederick Douglass AME Zion Memorial Church. A lot of history here. So much that we could dine in off of it. You know, we can dine off of it. And if we do this right, we could probably redirect what the revitalization looks like.
Yeah, and I've said, as a public school teacher, especially when I taught the older grades, I said, and I will say until the day I die, any topic of American history that you can ever think of was happening right here in Elmira. And in 2012, I wrote an article on the civil rights movement happening here in Elmira. People don't realize the victories that happened right here in Elmira in the civil rights movement.
Really?
And so there's so much history that's just not out there like it should be. And so
It's not well known yet.
it's not well known,
It's
and
not
that's
well
why
known
when
yet.
I taught, 5th and 6th grade, especially 5th grade, since it focuses on a lot of Western Hemisphere, standards, especially different people's struggles for equality, whether it's women, LGBTQ, African Americans, you name it. These are the things where I'm like, all right, I'm going to teach those standards, but I'm going to teach those standards using the history that happened right here, because I want kids to appreciate where they are so that they stay and make it great.
Interesting enough, Eastman was one of the founding members of the ACLU. She was one of the people who helped get past the ERA, and she was a suffragette. So, and she was a female attorney, which nobody was really doing back then.
Women's rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
So, that kind of environment and that type of atmosphere, you'd never know it. If you walk into Elmira today, you'd never know that these type of venerable people came through here.
And you'll have to ask Jim Hare about this, because Jim Hare's he knows.
That's where I got all the Eastman information from.
But our own Governor Hill, I believe that was him, or no, it wasn't Governor Hill. There was a politician that almost was going to be the vice president nomination, or the vice president nominee under Theodore Roosevelt and William McKinley, and we all know what happened to William McKinley. So we could have very easily had a president right here from Elmira, and the name of who that is escaping me, but these are things that you would never ever know.
So not only did the flood contribute to the demise, you also had the decline in manufacturing. This was a manufacturing town, so it really killed. No.
I might as well. I'm having these two young ladies just bend all over the place. Are you done? She's done.
But I'm just saying, they say it's always the flood, but there was an amalgamation of different things that came together just to make
There was a
the
push
form.
through the valley here. When I was a kid back in the 60s, they wanted to get rid of the smog in the valley. So the big move was to shut down all the industry. And they actually did. They wound up shutting most of the foundries down, most of the other industries in Elmira to clean the air, which, okay, they clean the air, but then all of a sudden, nobody was working. because there were no jobs. And
Is this part of the Rust Belt?
you could call it that. We had some big foundries in here, GE, the Chemung Foundry, Westinghouse.
You're talking about military history. We built the Norden bomb sites for the bombers in World War II here.
Is that
In the
right?
heights. In military history, this goes back to the French and Indian Wars. We had people moving through here. Then you had the Sullivan-Clinton campaign and the Red War.
The genocide.
World War I, we supplied all kinds of people through here. I think Chemung County still stands as having more military veterans in it than any other county in New York
Per
State.
capita.
Per capita.
I know in the sixties, they had, no, the fifties, they had a population nearing, what, 50,000?
Yeah.
Elmira was booming, and you can't, that's like 2.5 times the size it is now. And everyone was making a living wage.
1970, when I graduated, we held a talk, well, we were researching stuff about Elmira and Chemung County up to Bosse's, and we figured between the Heights, Elmira, and Horseheads, there was over 85, almost 90,000 people. And today,
And I'm not from here, I'm listening to the stories from, as a transplant, from my husband and my friends about there was no better place to be when you were a kid than Elmira. The black community was a community, it was almost self-sufficient. There were businesses, there was a neighborhood, there was a feeling, a sense of family and community, and they love it. And when they talk about it, it makes me wish I was here, because they had so much fun, and they would point out how beautiful the neighborhoods were when they grew up on the east side. Oh, that's Miss such and such's house. She had beautiful flowers, or, her trees, or, we had neighborhoods. And after the flood, of course, I call it urban re-negro, they come in, and the place that you want to build and tear down is in the black community, destroy the neighborhoods. So scattered everyone, and you no longer have that sense of cohesiveness. It makes us lose culture when we're not close together,
not to cut everything down, but you have to realize most of that flood, when it did its destruction, took out the east side.
Oh, it did,
It
but you
really
could have
did. It
rebuilt
just-
homes, but they came back and rebuilt, what do you call it, not commercial properties, but
Government buildings.
administrative type buildings, instead of, encouraging rebuilding the homes,
Yeah, you're
But-
right.
Yeah, I
But
heard
to go
all the
back to the
stories.
military stuff, okay, we get up into the Civil War, which we were talking about. And there were regiments from the Elmira area, or at least who marshaled through Elmira and became active in almost every theater of the war during the Civil War. You got the 141st and the 107th that wound up with Sherman on the march to Atlanta, through Atlanta, all the way to the sea. The 86th New York, the Steuben Rangers, started out in 1861. Their first battle was Second Bull Run, and they went all the way through to Appomattox. And like you were mentioning with the 107th, out of 1,000 men that went in, they were lucky to have probably 200 that came home. That from the original batch. We've had people, well, there was 161st New York that fought out west in Sabine Pass there with the Red River Campaign, and also at Port Hudson.
Texas.
And you've got another unit, I can't remember the name right now, that was fighting along the coast, where like the 54th did, along the plantations, stuff along the coast. There was a couple of units out of here for that.
Which my husband's great uncle was in.
Ah, okay.
You know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got the family.
Another shameless plug.
But Elmira, well, let's jump ahead a couple of decades. The old National Guard outfit helped here on Church Street. There was a unit out of there that were engineers, basically. And the invasion of Normandy, they were the ones that helped clear the obstacles on the beach. Nobody talks about it.
There's an incoming call. Answer your phone.
This town has got so much that came through it. People who stopped here on doing certain things. General Sherman, Kilpatrick from the Civil War. That Kilpatrick's uncle ran the bar in Wellsburg. And there was others, Diven from the other regiments and stuff, from the 107th, was a politician from the area. There was just so much here that people ignore. And some of them try to ignore it. one last little part on that. When we first, back in the 80s, we held reenactments down along the river. You don't know the hate mail that we got because we were bringing up the prison camp and history of Elmira during the Civil War. And it got a little touchy in a few places, but we plowed ahead anyway.
It's history.
There, I've had my say.
So before we end this, because I'm a board of trustee member for the Chemung County Historical Society, two things that I want to mention, other than please go visit that museum as well to learn about so much of this history. August 26th, the Chemung County Historical Society is celebrating their 100th year. So it's their 100th anniversary, so August 26th, they're having a little shindig over at the museum. I don't know, I believe it's at the museum, 1 to 5. And then also every year, we do the Ghost Walk in October, and that's a great way to learn about stories of local people who did great things. And so,
John Jones will be portrayed.
okay, good. So John Jones will be portrayed. So, you know, get involved with the Chemung County Historical Society, the John Jones Museum, the Friends of Elmira Civil War Camp. There's so much here. The Vietnam War veterans, they have their own museum on Davis Street as well.
Which is so cool.
It is so cool, and they put their heart and soul into opening that, and my dad was a founding member of that. So lots to do here, lots to learn, and
Somebody could just.
Lots to
Yeah.
invest in.
that's right.
It sounds like there's so much that could be done, like for tourism, for lots of things.
We need to come together
Yeah.
and really solidify a vision and then brand ourselves. You know, I keep talking about historic Elmira. It's a lot of history here.
I think you're right.
Well, I'm glad we were able to all bring all these factions together right here at the Democratic headquarters, where those type of initiatives can be built on and worked on and brought forth to the city fathers, mothers, people. So
Pretty good.
come back.
Give a round of applause to
Everybody. This is really nice.
Is that it? Are we done?
I think we're done.
Okay, we're done.
Are we off live right now?
No, wait a minute.